On a May evening in 1928, Frank T. Johns had arrived in town, and he was a presidential candidate from the Socialist Labor Party, and he lived in Portland, and he was giving a speech that evening just over this way at what used to be a bandstand and is now some bathrooms for the park here. And he was giving his speech. This is about 8 o'clock in the evening when he heard these cries for help coming from the river. So just up the river here, there's a footbridge where an 11-year-old boy named Jack Rhodes was fishing at the time, and his fishing line got caught underneath the bridge. So he leaned over the bridge in an attempt to free his line, and he ended up falling into the water. And his friends tried to lower down a pole to save him, but he couldn't grab onto the pole in time, and he drifted downstream this way, and he was crying out for help this whole time. So while that's going on, Frank T. Johns is in the middle of his speech over here at the bandstand, and he hears these cries for help. He immediately stops his speech, removes his coat, and runs for the river right over here, where he leaps inside the river and swims out toward this boy that's calling out for help. So Johns is the first responder from this side. Meanwhile, on the other side of the river, in a house, that white house that you can just see down there, that's where Jack's mother lived, and his sister also jumped in to the river from that side, as well as a couple bystanders. So there's an attempt coming from both sides of the river to rescue this boy. Now, on the other side of the river, the two people that were attempting to swim toward Jack, they both turned back because of the cold. This was in May, so the water was really cold. They barely made it back to the shore. I mean, at that point in time, Bend is a mill town, a very active mill town. Just upriver from us is one of the major mills in Bend. You have a faster river because there would have been ice melt, and you also have a deeper river because over time, the silt on the bottom of the river builds up. So it's about 8 feet deep, so deeper than this, stronger current, more items, more debris that's in the water, and just a harder river to navigate than the relatively placid Deschutes River that's behind me today. Meanwhile, on this side, Frank Johns, our politician, is swimming out, and he manages to reach the boy. So he gets to the middle of the river, he reaches the boy, and everyone that's sort of watching from the shore can tell that he's approaching his final effort. And so Frank, in sort of this last sort of heroic gesture, he pushes Jack toward the shore. So he pushes the boy toward this shore, the Deschutes, before he sinks for a final time beneath the river and drowns. Now Jack struggles on a little bit more toward this shore, and of course there's further attempts to try to get to him from this side, but he also fails in his efforts to reach the shore, and he drowned as well. So it was a double drowning in May of that year. Both of their bodies were recovered later a little bit downriver. Johns was a young candidate and a well-loved candidate for the Socialist Labor Party. He was 39 years old, so he's a young guy. He's in his second presidential run. He had also run when he was 35 years old, 4 years previous. At that time, he was the youngest candidate ever. And when Frank died, it was just this huge shock to the party. And they reacted with a lot of demonstrations of solidarity and memorials across the country, and recognition of Johns' sort of final effort, which they felt reflected his character, that he died in this effort to save a boy. He kind of, by doing so, he embodied the values the Socialist Labor Party wanted to hold so dearly. Values like courage and bravery, but more particularly about watching out for your fellow man, because it was all about the working class and about the working class uniting and being its own sort of representative body in government. So here's this man that dies in sort of this supreme effort to save another life, and that's kind of this ultimate gesture of man's humanity to man. There was press coverage of this event nationally. It attracted a lot of attention, of course. A relatively young presidential candidate drowns in such a heroic, at last, supreme effort. But the Socialist Labor Party, in terms of where it ranks, politically with the other parties. So of course you've got the Democrats, you've got the Republicans, and at that point in time you had other third parties as well, like the Prohibition Party, the actual Socialist Party, which was different from the Socialist Labor Party, and the Communist Party. So the Socialist Labor Party, in terms of their national visibility, was pretty low. So they're beneath all the 5 parties I just mentioned in terms of their vote count they'll get in national elections. So they're known about within select sort of working class circles around the nation. But what really attracted, of course, the national attention was just, here's a presidential candidate that drowned in the middle of a speech in an effort to save a kid, a boy that was drowning in the river. The city of Bend, though, rallied really quickly around trying to raise funds for the widow of Frank Johns, who was living in Portland at the time and had 2 young daughters. And no employment, of course, so she needed money. So the Citizens of Bend raised about $700, which is a lot of money in 1928, and they sent that up to Mrs. Johns in Portland to help her get by. And the Bend Bulletin, our local newspaper, spearheaded an effort to have the family awarded with the Carnegie Medal, which comes with an endowment. So the Carnegie Medal is awarded to citizens that have given their lives in an extreme effort of bravery. And that Carnegie Medal is housed today at the museum, at the Deschutes County Historical Society Museum. And it was recently gifted to the museum because of a local connection that we uncovered while we were researching this. So Frank Johns' grandson, Phil Michael, lives in Prineville today. And I met him as a result of doing the research into this story, into the Frank Johns story. And it turned out that he had the family medal, he had the Carnegie Medal still, as well as some other memorabilia from that era, and he donated that to the museum. So we're working on an exhibit right now that'll showcase these items, as well as a bit of history about Frank and about the Socialist Labor Party, and of course about the drowning that took place in the river behind me.